I just want to welcome everyone to the Commons and to thank our candidates from Lincoln and for Elyse Waugh for moderating our panel today. And I'm going to turn it over to Elyse, and she'll set the ground rules, and we'll get started. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Thanks for attending, for those of you who are here and watching on TV. I'm Elyse Waugh. I'm the editor of the Lincoln Squirrel. And they asked me to come and stand in front of the podium, so that's what I'm doing. So I'm going to ask each of, I'll introduce the candidates in a second, but I'll just let you know what we're going to do. I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves and make a brief statement for maybe about 4 minutes max, just about why they're running, and obviously in a contested race. There are 2 contested races this year. 2 people are running for a planning board seat and 2 are running for a select board seat. So after 4 of them have done that, I will ask each one of them a couple of questions, and then I will hand it over to the audience for Q&A. So at that point, I'll let you know what you can do to raise your hand and so forth. So first I'll introduce the panel. Starting from my immediate right here is Frank Clark, who is running for Select Board. Next to him is Jennifer Glass, also running for Select Board. She's an incumbent. Next is Gary Taylor. He's an incumbent running for a planning board. And next to him is Sarah Postlethwait, who is running for planning board. So those are our candidates. And I'm just going to, I'll mix it up later, but I'm going to start left to right with Frank and ask him to introduce himself. And if you want to speak and hand the mic back and forth to each other, that would be great.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. Thank each of you for coming. Thank the Commons for having us here. And thank you, Ellen, for arranging all of this. I'm Frank Clark. I'm a candidate for Select Board. And before I begin, if you get Jennifer and me mixed up, I'll tell you what I used to tell my mother all the time. My brother had black hair. When she would get our names mixed up, I would say, Mom, Law's got black hair and Frank's got red hair. So you can remember which one we are. I'm running because I think the town deserves a meaningful choice between the path we're on and a more moderate, inclusive way forward. We need to balance the aspirations of the vocal people in the town with that. Can't hear? Okay. We need to balance the aspirations of the politically active residents with those who are more quiet, but whose houses and homes and lives are affected by the paths that we have taken. We have to be sure that the majority of the town is happy that the essential character of the town of Lincoln, which is the 400-year heritage, will be preserved, and that public money is spent carefully. I'm sure all of you don't want your taxes rising outrageously, because if they do so, even if you live in the Commons costs go up, and those get passed on to you. In fact, in the issue of taxes, amongst all the towns in the state, Lincoln, you may be surprised to learn, is amongst the highest per capita or per household public debt load in the state. We have at the present time a debt load of approximately $40,000 per household. If you're a single person household, that means you have a net indebtedness share of the Lincoln budget of about $40,000. If we pass the community center that is on the town agenda, those taxes could rise as much as another $10,000 more, but even if it's a fraction of that, it's still a large debt burden, and our net indebtedness per person and per household is amongst the highest in the state of Massachusetts. We have a lot of other projects coming online that are going to need money in the near term. For example, we have roads that need work. We have a water main that's leaking. That's going to have to be replaced sometime within the next few years. We've lost moderation. We've lost the central way. We have borrowed $90 million to refurbish our school. It's a beautiful school. It's a great refurbishment. But had we been a little more patient, we could have gotten something of the order of $40 million from the state towards that school, and that would have almost half the tax burden that we have to deal with at the present time. And that is, we were in too much of a rush to finish the school before we got that state money, and that bothers me because I pay a lot of state taxes, and I'd like to see Lincoln get its share of all those taxes that I pay to the state, and some of you may do the same. The same applies to rezoning. In the present warrant Article 3, this before the town, and this month, on the March the 23rd, is the warrant article is going far beyond what the state requires of us under the Housing Choice Act. It's a maximalist approach. Now, if you want to support a maximalist approach built out in Lincoln, then my concern is, especially concentrated down by the train station, that this is going to have unforeseen costs that we haven't modeled. We have no clue what they are. At the minimum, we're going to have road costs. We're going to have water costs. So the same applies to the rezoning that's present. We have to recognize that the financial decisions we make as a town affect each and every one of us. And what's a favorite buzzword in a trickle-down economy, if we got taxes into town, it trickles down to each and every one of us. And our taxes go up, your rent goes up, everything goes up. Finally, we need diversity of opinion on our town boards. They have gotten too narrow. Our boards, committees, and working groups should have a diversity of citizen input and opinions, and I think we've moved away from that. And in summary, I would say that Lincoln is desperately in need of leadership. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I will now ask Jennifer Glass to introduce herself with 4 minutes.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here, and I thank Alan and Alice for organizing and for the Commons for hosting and doing all the tech work. And hello to everyone who is watching from their rooms. So my name is Jennifer Glass. I am the incumbent on the Select Board. I have been a member of the Select Board for 7 years. I moved here with my family at the end of 2006 and started to become involved in the life of the town when the Lincoln School Committee was looking for resident volunteers to serve on the class size policy subcommittee, and which is where I met Al Schmutzler. And that began sort of a journey of getting involved in topics that are multifaceted, require dealing with a lot of different viewpoints, contentious, and require a process that brings the town through to a decision point. So in 2008, it was suggested I run for school committee. There were some openings. I joined the school committee then and served until 2017. I was chair for a number of years and worked with the town through a first school building project that had state money and was not successful, and launched into the 2017 school building project that did result in a renovated building. I ran for Select Board in 2017 to fill a one-year spot that was being vacated and have served since then. And again, I find myself drawn to topics such as class size policy, or how do we want to take care of our building needs at the school, or how should we approach this Housing Choice Act that was passed by the governor with overwhelming support by the legislature. They are big topics, they're complex, they require us to balance a whole range of values, and my goal has been to try to be part of processes that give the town a range of choices, different ways to balance our values, and then to allow the town to make a choice and move forward. So that is the work that I have been doing. I really appreciate about being on the Select Board that all of the things that we talk about are interwoven. So beyond housing choice, I've also been involved recently in the work of the town to develop a climate action plan. I'm I'm co-chair of the town's Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Anti-Racism Committee. I am a member of the Affordable Housing Trust. And 1 minute. What I enjoy about all of these topics is how they are interconnected and how one plays off another and how we approach them in ways that, again, become, how we want to express who we are, who we would like to be, and how we would like to get there. So I have enjoyed my time very much. I look forward to continuing to work on those topics if you are kind enough to re-elect me in March. And I thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Jennifer. Next up is, Planning Board incumbent Gary Taylor.
Hello, I'm Gary Taylor, and I'm glad to see you all here. Thanks to Alan and Alice for putting this together, and thanks to all of you for coming. I've moved to Lincoln in 1989 and spent 2 years commuting back and forth to Los Angeles, so I really arrived here in about 1991. And in 1992, I went on to the Finance Committee and was there for several years. But before I really get into my history in the town too much, I want to talk a little bit about my professional background, which I think is relevant here. I have a law degree. I got a degree in management from MIT, and from there I went into economic consulting, and after about 4 years of working for another firm, I started a small consulting firm that grew from 2 people to over 400 now, with offices in 14, I have 14 offices in the United States and Europe and in the Far East. And as the CFO and COO of that company, I was in charge of designing and building offices in Boston, Cambridge, London, San Francisco, and New York. So I have quite a bit of business experience that I brought to the table when I came to the town. Getting back to the town, as I said, I started with the Finance Committee along with Al Schmertzler all those many years ago. And on the Finance Committee, I chaired it for, I think, 6 years or so. And one of the major things that we did was to integrate the town's accounting with, we actually computerized the town's accounting. When I first came, I had to put the town's accounting on my laptop. The rest of it was all in paper. But we got the accounting system computerized. Later, when I was a selectman, we managed to integrate the accounting for both the school and the town, which really simplified things in terms of budgeting. After the Finance Committee, I went on to the Housing Commission. I was there for several years. And even though I only stayed on the Housing Commission for a few years, I have stayed involved in affordable housing pretty much for my entire career. And I have been involved in almost all of the affordable housing that's been developed over the last 30 years. Among the affordable housing that I was involved in was the affordable housing here at the Commons. And I was on a small group of people that actually helped make the Commons happen. It wasn't the Commons then, it was the Groves. But it took, essentially what had happened is that the property had been bought by a Lincoln resident, and he wanted to establish a school here, and it didn't work out. So the group that I was with put him together with the deaconess, and they purchased the property and developed the Commons. Okay. Since then, I went to the Board of Selectmen. I continued to work on housing over the years. And I think my time there was very, very well spent. We were involved in many projects that I think benefited the town. Since I only have half a minute left, I then went on to the planning board, and the reason I went to the planning board was to simplify it for the town's residents. People had been coming to the planning board and had been forced to come back 2 or 3 times to get their proposals approved, and having to bring a lawyer and an architect back 3 times to the planning board was a very expensive proposition. So over the years, we've simplified the process, and I think we've made it very useful. are very helpful to people applying to the planning board. And what that's allowed us to do is spend more of the time actually planning, which is where I hope to spend another 3 years.
Thank you. And finally, Sarah Postlethwait, who is also running for planning board.
Hello. Thank you guys for taking time out of your day to be here. Thank you, Alice and Ellen and the Commons for organizing this. My name is Sarah Postlethwait. I am running for a seat on the planning board. You may be able to tell as the speech gets longer that I really don't like public speaking at all. And this is not inside my comfort zone, so please forgive me. I've never aspired to run a political campaign before, but I feel the current issues facing Lincoln are far too important to sit on the sidelines and just hope for the best. I may not have a formal background in development, but I am unprejudiced, versatile, and eager to learn. I don't have any alliances, I will not be making deals behind the scenes with anyone, and I'm only looking out for the best interest of the town and our stated goals, protecting what we've achieved in the past, while at the same time adapting for the needs of the future. I have grown increasingly concerned, as with many of my other fellow residents, with Lincoln's chosen path to comply with the state-mandated Housing Choice Act and its proposed bylaws. I have dedicated countless hours to researching the law, its guidelines, its compliance model, every detail around it. I have studied several other towns' zoning bylaws and their HCA bylaws to see just how our bylaws could be improved. I have shared my concerns with planning board members, select board members, the Housing Choice Act working group members, FinCom members. I feel we can do better, and we have plenty of time to do better. But instead of being the squeaky wheel, I've decided to be a part of the change and run for a seat on the planning board. Lincoln's current Housing Choice Act proposal is rezoning 72 acres of land, which is 71% more than is required by the state. These are by right units that we're zoning for. This means that as long as a developer follows the set of rules established in our town's bylaws, they can build the maximum allowed, and the town has no right to deny that development. It's imperative that the HCA proposal and bylaws that we pass align with the vision that we see for our town. I feel what is being submitted for the town meeting vote in a few weeks does not. Our HCA proposal puts our commercial center at risk by rezoning the RLF property for 100 residential units, 60 more units than it presented in its Phase 1 build-out a week ago. The RLF, or any future owner or ground lessee of the mall, can build the additional 60 units by right without a town meeting vote. And the only way those will get built is by bulldozing the remaining buildings at the mall that are not already removed in Phase 1. It's already clear that the retail space at the mall will be significantly reduced under Phase 1, so it's imperative that we consider how those additional 60 units would impact the remaining businesses at the mall. Reducing the units from 100 to 40 would be a simple but effective change in the HCA proposal. Furthermore, the current HCA proposal includes 12 parcels of land along Codman Road. This subdistrict is currently zoned as an R1 district. It's beautiful, tree-filled, hardly developed strip of land that is a wildlife safe haven and is surrounded by wetlands and farms. Our proposed HCA bylaws are seriously lacking in the protections for this subdistrict and for all 72 acres of the rezoned land for that matter.
1 minute.
It has no restrictions on impervious surfaces, no green space requirements, minimal light pollution protections, no mature tree protection bylaw. We are the stewards of this land. We are the ones who should be safeguarding it. If we are going to rezone it for multifamily developments, the least we can do is ensure that the bylaws are written in a way that reasonably maximizes or minimizes the negative environmental impact of development. I firmly believe that the current proposed path towards HCA compliance has major flaws that could be significantly changed, and it can significantly change the landscape of the town that we all know and love. But I'm hopeful we can all sit down at a table and come up with a better path towards HCA compliance that will gain significant support, fully comply with the regulations of the law, and protect the values that are important to this town. Thank you for considering voting for me for planning board, and I hope that my focus on critical thinking, thoroughly researched planning, and inclusive dialogue will bring value to Lincoln and win your vote.
Thank you. Now I'm going to ask a couple questions that are specific to the positions that the boards that folks are running for, and I'll start with the select board with Jennifer. Basically, in terms of your background or vision or qualifications, why should someone vote for you rather than Frank without disparaging Frank? give us the reason that we should pull the lever for Jennifer Glass.
There is not a chance I would disparage Frank. I know him to be a thoughtful person, and this is definitely not about that.
So I should mention that this will be just 2 minutes each.
Okay, very good. So as I say, I have been engaged in the town for quite a while. I am willing to take on difficult and thorny topics, to not always win, and to think about what you do when the town decides to take a direction or isn't sure or needs more time to think. I am happy to work with people and figure out where to go next. And I think that 2012 is an example of that. We had a school vote in 2012 where we had money from the state that was going to be available to us, and it did not receive the 2/3 majority that it needed at town meeting. That was a big decision point for the town. And it took us a while to figure out what we were going to do, how we were going to recover from that, and how we were going to move forward.
1 minute.
And working with a whole lot of other people, residents, committee members, people who had voted no but said, hey, I want to be part of the solution. We took a lot of time to listen, to understand where sort of what we needed to do differently, and to develop a process that was going to give people more choice before we got to the final decision. And it's a process that we've just repeated for the community center and for the Housing Choice Act, where we developed a process that gave people a range of choices and then said, your turn to decide, and we will carry out what the will of the town is. So I think I bring a history of not being afraid to have those difficult conversations, being willing to work with people whether they have agreed with me or not, and to find ways to move forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. And now I will ask the same question of Frank. What makes you the better choice for voters than your opponent to vote for the select board? 2 minutes.
Well, I've never really known with my looks. Jennifer is certainly better looking than I am, and she certainly has a lot more experience than I do in the things that she's done. The thing that I would do better in this town is what I've been focusing on the whole time. This town has proposed large projects, and town leadership has always proposed the most expensive version of that project, and town leadership has not looked into the details of the long-term costs of that project. And to give you an example, our net zero school that we built. Net zero means that it should produce as much, in this case electricity, as it uses. The utility bill for that school last year, I'm glad all of you are sitting down, was just under $500,000. And town leadership can do a lot better than this.
1 minute.
We can do the things that we want to do for less expense than we're spending on, and we certainly can do the things that we want to do so that the long-term costs are better held in check. I can do a better job on managing the town's money. Thank you.
Thank you. Now for the planning board candidates, I'm going to ask Sarah first. Similar kind of thing. Given what we know about the two candidates, why would you like voters to pull a lever for you rather than your opponent?
Well, I think I can say at this point, I'm positive, I'm collaborative, and I'm experienced. What I've been able to do in my 30 years is to get things done. And that generally means bringing the various interests together, figuring out a way forward, and figuring out how to make it work. Once you've done that, then you've got to convince the town's electorate to get behind it and support it not only with their votes but with their money. And I've been able to do that, as I said, over the years very effectively. And that's what I really bring to the table. Part of it's business experience, part of it's my experience in the town, and really taking to heart the town's vision and what Lincoln can be if we all collaborate. And I've been very upset about the division that's developed in the town, and I think that I can continue to work to help reduce that division. But in what I've been doing, I've been pursuing the town's vision as best I can. And when it comes to things like what's going on at the mall, let me just read to you some quotes from the town's long-range plan that was adopted in 2009. And that is create a compact, vital, walkable village center in Lincoln Station that provides more housing choices, new public transportation, goods and services for residents, and opportunities for social interaction. There's several statements like that in the town's long-range comprehensive plan.
20 seconds.
That's what I've been pursuing.
20 seconds, sorry.
But anyway, like I said, I've been able to get many things done in the town, and that's what I bring to the table.
Thank you, Gary. And finally, Sarah, why would you like people to vote for you rather than your opponent? And what would you bring to the table that your opponent wouldn't?
Absolutely. I think the reason that I'm here is actually the lack of collaboration that I have experienced from the planning board. I never wanted to be on the planning board. This is not something that I've aspired all my life to do, but since I've been focusing on this Housing Choice Act since September, and honestly, I've been involved in the process for 10 years now. I've been an active member of South Lincoln, going to these boards meetings. I've even taken my infants to these board meetings because, it's just important. But there's a major lack of choices that are being given to the town. It seems that the most expensive, most blunt force way to achieve something is the way that we go about it. And other options may be given, but it's clear the favorable one is the most expensive, and it's the biggest way to do things. And I don't think that's the way that our town should be run. With the Housing Choice Act in particular, there's no reason to rezone 72 acres of land if we only need to rezone 42.
1 minute.
There's no reason to zone for 801 units of housing when we only need 635. There's no reason to rezone for 100 units at the mall when they only want to fit 40 there in their phase 1 development, and they've said that's economically viable. There's many ways that we can go about this, and I think if we just all sat down and had a good conversation about it, which we have begged for, I have begged for, my friends on the Lincoln Residents for Housing Alternatives has begged for this, and we've been just denied since September, and that's the only reason that I'm here is because I think we can do better.
Thank you. Now I'm going to ask another question of all the candidates, vary by board, and then we'll throw it open for Q&A. So starting with Jennifer, as far as the select board goes, everyone here is running for a 3-year term. So what do you think is the #1 priority for the town that you would like to pursue as a member of the select board, and how do you think you'd go about accomplishing that?
So I do think that we need to approve housing choice this year to remain compliant. The select board actually voted last night on a statement that talks about our support for making sure that we are compliant with this law. It is something that unlocks other possibilities for us on the financial side. We are a town where a lot of our revenue is coming from our property taxes. And being compliant with the Housing Choice Act gives us the opportunity to get state funds for important projects such as water main replacement, stormwater control, building sidewalks, that allows us to work on some of the things that are important to each of us in town, but in a way that the cost is defrayed by getting some state grants.
1 minute.
So we'll put housing choice for the side for the moment, and we'll pretend that it's 2025 and we have figured housing choice out. The pieces that I think we will need to concentrate on, I mean, there are multiple. There are infrastructure needs, as I say. There's water mains, there are roads, et cetera. We also have developed the framework for this climate action plan that permeates really every sector of town life. What does it mean to try to mitigate the impacts of climate change?
30 seconds.
Drought, too much water, how are we heating our homes? What does it mean for our land-based practices for farming? So that's another big topic that touches all of our lives in many ways. And I think that that will be an important piece for us to look to the future.
Thank you. Sarah, if you're elected to the planning board, obviously the Housing Choice Act is the biggest item on the town agenda for that board. So you can address that or other things, but what do you think is the most important thing that you personally would like to see the planning board accomplish and that you can best help accomplish in the next 3 years?
Absolutely. Clearly, the Housing Choice Act is a passion project of mine. I do not debate that we need to comply with the law, and I think many people who are opposed to the current option on the table would agree with me. We want to comply. Fighting the state is not even worth the battle. But there's better ways to comply that will create affordable housing, that will protect the environmental regulations that we have instilled and that develops Lincoln for the last 100 years. We are a rural town that people come to because of how green it is, how it's a nature preserve. Like, we need to preserve Lincoln as it is. After the Housing Choice Act, I really think we should focus more on affordable housing because there isn't a housing crisis right now. There's 11,000 condos and apartments available in the Boston area right now. There is an affordable housing crisis.
1 minute.
And we need to focus on that. And even the Housing Choice Act only has, because of the report that we filed with the state, we're only allowed to require 10% affordable housing in the Housing Choice Act. And we need to resubmit that report. We need to try to get 15, 20% as the area towns around us have, because housing should be affordable, and it should be affordable now. And this Housing Choice Act, as it is presented, will not create affordable housing, unfortunately.
30 seconds.
I'm passing.
Okay, thank you. Frank, as a member of the select board, if you're elected, if you had to pick just one priority for the town as a whole for the next 3 years that you would like to help realize as a member of the board, what would that be? And how would you go about it?
Thank you. This is really easy. It's money. If I'm elected to the select board, I will do my level best to make sure that the town gets the projects that the town wants for the least amount of money, for the least amount of operating cost, and the lowest tax burden. Lincoln is amongst the highest per capita bonded indebtedness towns in the state of Massachusetts. Our tax burden per capita is out of sight. I have talked to 2 people in campaigning for this position who literally were leaving Lincoln because they couldn't afford to live here. They can't afford to pay the taxes. So my number one priority, if I'm elected to the select board, will be protecting your pocketbook and minimizing your cost rises, because those taxes filter down to you just like they do to me. I see them directly. You probably see them indirectly, but they're there. So my number one priority is to get Yankee frugality. Let's get our money's worth. Let's do the things we want to do as inexpensively as possible. And furthermore, we want the cost per year afterwards to be reasonable, which is not what we have now. Thank you.
Thank you. And let's see, who did I miss? Gary. Sarah. Yes. So if you're elected to another term on the planning board, what is the number one priority that you would like the board to prioritize, I guess, and how would you like to go about that for the next 3 years?
Well, I think people have mentioned the things that are really important to the town. Obviously, right now, we're facing the Housing Choice Act choice, and depending upon where the vote goes, either implementing that or starting another round of trying to, if it's voted down, starting another round to try and reach consensus or some kind of workable consensus is going to be really important. I think the housing issue is one that is important across the state and in Lincoln, and it's particularly difficult in Lincoln because, let's face it, we're an aging population. And I think a couple of years ago, several years ago, 10 years ago now, we did a study that said that there's an average of 2.5 empty bedrooms in every house in Lincoln. And people are aging in place, they don't have a place to go. Unfortunately, now we have the commons, which provide some options. We'd like to have some more options, some more additional housing that older people that would like to be moving out of their places could move down into and stay in Lincoln. But I do think the long-term, the issues that Frank's raised about the long-term expense of the town is really important. But I do want to say a couple things here about that. We're looking at the community center right now, and the town meeting was provided with 3 cost options going forward, and the town chose the more expensive one, despite the fact that most of us thought that town would go for the middle option that would have saved some money. And again, when we talk about the Housing Choice Act,
20 seconds. 20 seconds.
Okay. 5 different options were presented to town meeting. Among them, the option that Sarah's group put forward, and the town meeting chose option C, the one that we're pursuing now, and the one we're obligated to pursue until the town may decide at this town meeting that it no longer wants to pursue that. But that was the town's choice. So we have to figure out how to best accomplish that and still control costs as much as we can.
Thank you. So now I'm going to open it up to the board. It looks like Alan has a microphone. That's great. What I'm going to ask is that if you have a question, obviously raise your hand, and Alan will come by with a microphone for you.
Carefully.
Let us know which candidate you want to ask the question of, and Alan will repeat the question if it wasn't clear, or he'll summarize it. And whoever answers the question will each have 2 minutes to respond. And just a reminder, this is a time for questions and not statements about what you might think as an audience member. So, and we have to wrap up at 4:30, so we might not get to every question, but we will do our very best. So with that said, I will ask people to raise their hands.
I'm at town meeting, we'll each be asked to vote on 2 articles that are of interest to all of us. One is the Housing Choice Act, and the other is the funding for the community center. When I'm on the board of the community center building committee, I'd like to ask each of the candidates to tell us how they personally plan to vote on those 2 articles. I think we know how Sarah's going to vote. And why?
Thank you. If you could keep your answers short, like 2 minutes, minute and a half, great. Thank you. And I'll start with Frank, since he's closest to me.
You're asking how I would vote? For the Housing Choice Act, we're only voting on the zoning. The Housing Choice Act was approved in the December special town meeting, so we're only voting on the zoning under the Housing Choice Act. And I will vote against that because I think that the concentration of people near the train station as it's presently implemented has got unforeseeable costs associated with it for us that are going to make our taxes go up. and I think we need some planning for that. By that, I don't mean that I'm against meeting the state's Housing Choice Act requirements. I think it's really trivial to meet the Housing Choice Act requirements with a minimal damage to the Lincoln downtown area. But we are proposing to make a huge increase in the population in Lincoln over the term of this build-out. This is sort of a maximum build-out in that area. And that's going to cost us in police, fire, we're going to put in water lines. There's going to be a lot of costs associated with that.
30
We're going to
seconds.
run our taxes up. So I would vote against that. For the community center, I think we've built the community center a whole lot more efficiently than we're doing now, and I don't want to see the mistakes repeated that were made in the school remod. So I would vote down the community center as well to give us a chance to do a rational planning for A, what people want, B, can we build a community center that meets people's needs, that doesn't cost an arm and a leg, and C, can we build a community center that meets people's needs for which the long-term costs don't mushroom like they have done for our school remod. I think we can do much better than that.
Thank you. Jennifer?
So I will vote yes for the community center, and I will vote yes for the Housing Choice Act. And the Housing Choice Act vote is a yes for several reasons. The first is that we do need to be compliant with the state law. It is fiscally responsible to make sure that we are able to access any state funding that could be available to us. I also say yes because we had a process that allowed town meeting to choose, and I would be voting yes for it regardless of which option had come out of that town meeting, because the important part is that we came to a decision as a town to decide which way we wanted to move forward, and I think it's important we do so. So I am a yes on both of those. For the community center, I vote yes. Again, I honor the decision that people made at town meeting, and I know the way I voted at that town meeting, but I would support any of the choices that the town had come to, because that was the key decision. We have choices. How would the town like to move forward? And town meeting is our way of determining, to the best of our ability, what the town would like to do. It is our legislative body. It is the keeper of the purse strings. It is what we use to guide our way forward. So I believe that the community center will help meet needs that the Council on Aging and Human Services has, that the Parks and Recreation Department has, and it will also meet the needs of our after-school program. So yes and yes.
Thank you. Gary?
Well, I am a yes and a yes as well. The community center, I was first involved with the community center when I was a selectman, and that was a long time ago. This process has been going on for a decade. And in the years, as the years went by, we first came up to the school building project, and the community center was on the table then as well, and there was kind of an understanding that we'd let the schools go first, and then the community center would come. So frankly, people have been working on this community center for a very, very long time. And again, like Jennifer, there was a process. There were options presented at town meeting. I thought that the 75% option would be the one chosen, but the town meeting decided otherwise. And, you know, that's our process.
A minute?
I think the HC is sort of the same way. We've been working on it for a long time. We were actually working on rezoning the mall and the area around it even before the Housing Choice Act was passed. Because, as I said, the vision of the town for a long time has been to redevelop that area in a way that supports the businesses and provides more housing options. And again, the options were presented at town meeting. The town meeting chose. I actually liked D1, but town meeting chose option C. So again, I will be supporting it at town meeting.
Thank you, Gary. And Sarah?
I think my view on the HCA is pretty clear, but I will be voting no for it because I feel we can do better. Option C that we voted yes on December town meeting, while I don't negate that it won, I negate that option E had a very poor showing. Out of the 39-minute speech by the Housing Choice Act Working Group, only 2 minutes were spent on option E, and it had very misleading information provided about it. The Lincoln Residents for Housing Alternatives, we tried to present option E to the town meeting, and we were denied by both the moderator and the Housing Choice Act Working Group. So I don't believe it had a fair showing, but I'm not debating that option C is on the table, which is why I think it should be voted down right now, because we can do better, and we have plenty of time to do better. The option C was created in September. That was 6 months ago. We have until December to come up with a better plan that preserves our town. For the community center, it's actually a very, I'm on the line about it, but I believe that we do need a community center. We do need better services for the Council on Aging, but I don't think the community center that is on the table right now is financially smart. I don't think I can even afford the taxes if they go higher than they are right now. And then we have other tax increases that we have in the very immediate future to consider. So I think that we can come up with a better plan to give the Council on Aging a place that is not a $25 million building. Thank you.
Thank you. So are there any other questions? Please raise your hand.
First, I'd like to thank all the candidates for coming here today. It's really good to see your faces and get a better feel for who you are. And I do appreciate...
I'm sorry. Can I ask you to start over again because the candidates didn't hear? If you could just speak clearly into the mic. Sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. I just wanted to thank you all for coming here today to talk to us. The issue that I'm having the greatest problem with is whether the rural area should be included in the MBTA district. I'd like to hear briefly from all of you about how you feel about it, whether that is not a good choice. Sarah, you've already talked extensively about that, so I hope that you could talk more about why you think the present owners, the RLF, are not going to make a good decision with respect to the interests of the town.
Yes, I will kick this one off. I gratefully appreciate everything that the RLF has done for our town. The town is Lincoln, the Lincoln that we know and love because of the RLF. But I also believe that, as of September, they had planned to sell the mall property. So we cannot just keep relying on the RLF to do right with the town. They have considered selling it. Right now, they're considering a ground lease of it. I think if we just reduced it down to 40 units, which is what their last proposal was, they want to do a phase 1 40-unit development. Any future rezoning that involves multifamily at the mall can be done separately. We can do it proactively before it needs to be a development at town meeting, or it can be an actual development proposal at town meeting. Due to the HCA, only a 50% majority is now needed to pass multifamily rezoning at town meeting. Any multifamily rezoning, not even just the HCA. That's a very low bar to cross. And if 50% of the town does not think adding above 40 units of housing at the RLF is at the mall is a good idea, then it's probably not a good idea. So I think we can easily just either completely remove it from the HCA and have it as a separate issue, or reduce it down to 40 units rather than the full 100 that is on the table right now. That's a lot of units. It's a lot.
Thank you. Gary.
Well, I think the process has been very, very inclusive. I think what's proposed at the mall right now is reasonable. And I think that the RLF has made a pretty clear case as to why they need to be included. And the case is this. If you rezone areas around the mall for by right development, and other towns like Lexington are rezoning areas around their commercial districts for by right development, it's very unlikely that developers, and we should point out at this point, the RLF last time went through this process as the owner themselves, but they no longer are in a position to undertake this kind of development at the mall anymore. So they need to bring in some private money, and to do that, it's very discouraging to have by right options all around you, which are much more attractive to people that want to invest their money, and leave the RLF alone with a much more burdensome process, which would be an overlay process.
1 minute.
So I think that's why the RLF is included, and why it really behooves us to respect their position and include them in the redevelopment under the HCA.
Thank you. Jennifer.
I will add to that, and if you listen to the meeting that the RLF just held on February 29th, they talked very clearly about the signal that they will be getting from the town from this vote, and that they consider being part of the HCA to be an essential first step of a very long process to actually redevelop the mall. That there are numerous hurdles to overcome, some of which Gary just mentioned, and that they see the town vote as an indicator that the town supports their decision to try to redevelop. I think they have been responsive to the town when it indicated that maybe selling the property made everyone feel a little uncomfortable, and then they started to explore and talk more about doing a ground lease, which would give them, they are still ultimately the owner of the property.
1 minute.
And in terms of the number of units versus the zoned number of units, I think one of the important pieces to understand about the housing choice zoning is that it is zoning, and it is not a housing production plan. So if they are zoned for 100 units and they only ever develop 40, we simply get the credit for the 100, and in fact it helps us out. And the current district, as it was voted, relies on the units that are zoned in that area to work. The district is actually about 64 acres, about 34 are developable, the rest are wetlands.
20 seconds.
It is zoned for 648 units. Our requirement is 635. So we are reliant on including the the RLF area, too many acronyms, in the zone that the town chose in December.
Thank you. And Frank.
I am hearing impaired. Could you tell me exactly what you asked about the RLF in the mall?
Sure. Would you mind, Alan, or the gentleman repeating the question for... Sure.
Yes, certainly. I find personally that the inclusion of the mall in the MBTA district seems to be the most contentious point. I've heard a lot of arguments about why it's bad or why it's necessary, why it's good. I'd like to hear your personal opinion on whether it's a good idea to be including the mall area as part of the MBTA district.
Okay, there are several parts to your question to respond to. The first is that at the special town meeting, we included them all as part of the Housing Choice Act response. Second, the RLF has gotten entangled in that, possibly not by their desire, but it's a fact of the way the town responded chose to respond to the Housing Choice Act. Whether that was a good decision or a bad decision is not something we can debate at this point because the town decided they were going to do that unless we vote it down. I think maybe a rational way out of this to uncomplicate things for the RLF might be for the town or a private entity to buy out the RLF so that they don't get all tangled up in the Housing Choice Act and the zoning that's required thereof and all the rest of our attempt to build out housing in the central area around the train station. I mean, it's a very, at this juncture in time, since the town voted on option C, which included the mall area as part of the Housing Choice Act, it's just a very complicated question and it has a very complicated answer. In my opinion, had town shown a little leadership, we might have chosen a different route for which we had known costs and known complications.
30 seconds.
But we didn't. This is the route we chose, so this is the road we have to hope. We don't have a lot of choice, unless the town should choose to buy out the RLF. But even then, the mall is included under the Housing Choice Act as it was passed, unless we vote it down.
Thank you. Well, it looks like we're right at 4:30, so...
If I may, I know
Sure.
Mr. Levington had a follow-up question. Do we have time for that?
it's up to you. It's up to you and the folks who run the place. It's okay with me. Okay.
Gary, I know you were involved in the town for a long time, and you were involved when this piece of property we're standing on was farmland. Could you share with us some of the history of how we went from an empty piece of land to the commons?
Well, it wasn't totally empty. There was a lot of empty space here, but there was, for many years, a convent here. And then later that building was used as a Japanese language school, Banzai Gakuin, I think. But as I said, when we did our at-risk properties report analysis, we did it years ago, and this property was identified as one of the properties that the town should be worried about and concerned about. So when the property came up for sale, we began immediately to think about what we could do with this. And we got interrupted by the fact that a local gentleman named Holt Massey bought this property and was going to use it to bring the Waldorf School from Lexington. But it turned out the Waldorf School wasn't interested. So we put together a group that essentially got Holt Massey, who owned the property, together with the Deaconess. It was headed by a guy named Herb Taylor. And the Deaconess was in the business of doing this kind of development and not-for-profit. And they were willing to buy the property and develop it as what it is now. And it was a kind of option, housing option and care option that wasn't available in Lincoln. So it was a very attractive opportunity for the town, and it's turned out to be a great addition.
Thank you very much for all the attendees, and thank you to the candidates for coming out here and sharing their views and answering questions. So I guess the one other thing I'm supposed to mention is that on the town election day, which is Monday, March 25th, there will be 2 shuttle buses to take you to the polls. They are at, if I can find it here, at 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. And you need to sign up for a slot in the black binder at the concierge's desk. Thank you very much.